When I was 17, I believe I saw a demon. Does anyone here truly believe they've seen a supernatural being? Hi everyone, it's Em. I hope you enjoyed today's video and share your stories below in the comments. Story 1. To begin, I am an atheist, a skeptic, and I think all of these stories have a logical reason behind them. However, when I was 9 or 10, I had a Halloween day party, and my friends and I were playing with the Ouija board. One of those Parker Brother games bought from Target. The entire time we played with it, asking it questions and everything. I was subtly moving the marker to answer the questions, trying to freak my friends out. They must have assumed that I was moving it because we were just laughing and nobody took it seriously. When we were finished, we all stood up and started walking out of the room. One of us turned back to face the board and said goodbye to it, giggling like little kids do. And the marker moved completely on its own, at least 6 inches to cover the word goodbye on the board. We all saw it, including my mom and her fiance, who were in the room with us. None of us even screamed. We just sat there, stunned in silence. After a few seconds, my mom went over and kicked over the marker with her toe, and nothing else happened. My mom and her fiance were genuinely concerned and looked over the board. Still today, this is the only thing I've experienced that I can't imagine how to explain logically. I thought maybe my mom or her fiance had a string, but it moved in the office in a direction from where they were standing. There's no fan in the room, and none of us felt any sort of gust. The marker is made of plastic and cannot be affected by magnets. Hell, we didn't even live in an area subject to earthquakes or tectonic movement, so that has to be ruled out too. My mom considered moving us out of the house, but we never did, and nothing like that ever happened again. We all still talk about it today, with the 2 friends I'm still in contact with anyway, and we all agree that it must have been some supernatural event that we can't explain. Any ideas? OP honestly went through all of my realms of thinking, from simple things like wind to true forces of nature like the earthquake. Even the string they ruled out, so I'm honestly not too sure. Let me know if you guys think of anything. Story 2. My pops always said he saw something like a demon once. We're from New Orleans, and one of his cousins ran into him on the street today. And while catching up, he invited his cousin and girlfriend over for dinner. Mom and Pops are vetting the girlfriend, and she mentioned she's a witch. Not a Wiccan, not a shaman. But I cast spells on people to get what I want. Mom's is creeped out, but Pops just shrugs at it. His cousin mentions, yeah, his girlfriend is a witch, and one Saturday he woke up with her straddling his stomach, eyes rolled back, chanting over him. She does not look happy at this getting a mention. Hours pass, they leave. Everyone goes to sleep, and Dad has weird dreams. He's never said what, just weird. And he opens his eyes in the middle of the night, and he describes it as like in Scooby-Doo or something, where they look into the forest and all they see are the things looking at them. He saw pairs of eyes from all over his room, belonging to things perched on furniture. He runs from the room into the living room and hits a few lights. He's not religious, not Christian, but starts praying to Jesus. He's winging it. He's just saying, Jesus, help me, over and over, and he sees it. The way the house was shaped, the dining area wasn't lit from the living room, but they were connected. He sees what he's described as an 8-foot-tall warthog that walked on its hind legs, has red irises, and was wearing some kind of hat or helmet, lumber from the dining room to the front entry area. It got to where the front door is and didn't go through there, but through a section of wall on the front face of the house and just faded from sight. He whipped heavily for a while, cleaned up in the bathroom, and just drank coffee in the living room of the night until he had to go to work. Look, man, to each their own when it comes to dating, but I think if someone I ever dated told me they casted spells and then I woke up to them straddling me, and not in a fun way, I would probably leave too. Maybe make sure, though, I told them in a nice way so that they wouldn't hex me and turn me into a frog as I try to leave. Story 3. Not really a supernatural/alien, but whatever. When I was 8, I was at my grandma's house with my sister and my cousin. My sister was 10 and my cousin was 16. My grandma lives in the country on an almond farm and told my cousin that she could practice driving her truck around if she agreed to wash it. As my cousin and my sister were washing the truck, I decided to leave and play my game, where I spy on them like a detective and write notes in my notebook. I hide behind a chicken coop, probably about 300 feet away, peeking around the corner to spy on them. Then I look straight ahead and I see it. I see Bigfoot, no joke. And Bigfoot is doing exactly what I am doing. He's watching my cousin and my sister. He's standing behind a pile of firewood, putting his hands on top of the pile to lean over, and he's watching them. I'm scared, so I back up slowly towards the end of the chicken coop until I'm at the corner and no longer in plain sight, and then race towards the front of the house. I run up to my cousin, tell her what I just saw, and she says it was probably a coyote. She wouldn't believe me. I ran inside. I know what I saw, and I wasn't going to be outside with that thing. I drew my cousin a picture of what I saw as well, and she continued to tell me that it was probably a coyote. No, it was not. No one ever believes my story, but I still believe in Bigfoot to this day. Logically, I think to myself now, what the hell would Bigfoot be doing on my grandma's almond farm in the valley in California? But he was there, damn it. Honestly, I think I would prefer a Bigfoot than the alternatives, which are either wild animals or a creeper just watching two random girls. At least people always make out Bigfoot to seem pretty chill. Story 4. I'm pretty skeptical about all of this stuff. I have crazy dreams, intrusive thoughts, and sleep paralysis, where my mind is awake but my body is still paralyzed, and I'm trying to get out of a bad dream. I don't know what it is about me, but I've just never taken any of this seriously. From a pretty early age, I was able to understand that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I used to turn my nose up at people who were super credulous until I met my darling step-grandmother. She's a smart woman. She's atheist, no nonsense, and pretty awesome. But she genuinely believes she's been abducted by aliens. She doesn't talk about it with me, and I only know about this through my stepdad. She's been having abduction experiences since she was little. She believes they really happened, but she just chooses to ignore it. She'd be mortified if she knew that I knew. My step-grandfather and her kids are the only ones she's spoken to about it. She doesn't have any paranormal interest otherwise. I'm not a particularly credulous person, so I don't think she's actually been abducted. Then again, I don't think she's just making things up either. I think she's had an experience that is so realistic that it is real to her. Getting to know her and getting to realize that she isn't a total loony has made me rethink the rolling that I used to do to repair normal experiences. While I think most of this stuff can just be explained by the misfirings of the remarkably creative and ducked-up brains we all possess, I don't think you're a bunch of loons. Just remember, the brain is a powerful instrument and is totally capable of presenting incredibly realistic but ultimately fake images and sensations. Story 5. When I was young, I woke up one night to a figure standing in the doorway. It was backlit, so I would only see its outline. It started walking towards me, and I figured it was my brother or dad. But as it got closer, I knew it wasn't one of them. But I didn't know who it was. I know I called out to it to ask who it was, but I don't know if it responded. When it got to the foot of my bed, it began leaning over me, and I saw its face. Almost like one of those cloth dummy heads they sometimes put on mannequins in stores. It had definite distinguishing features, but at the same time was completely blank, almost like the face was transforming constantly, always something but never whole. I kicked my foot into it a few times. The first kick felt solid, but by the second or third, it began to dissolve and fade away. I turned the light on and sat for a few minutes and never told a soul. The second time I encountered it, I awoke feeling almost as if I had been dropped on the bed. I was completely sideways on the bed with my feet hanging off the side, and I was on top of the covers. I sat up just to glimpse the figure walking out the door as he looked over his shoulder at me. I can't to this day shake the feeling that he had taken me from my bed many times, and I caught him trying to take me the first time, and the second time I awoke to him returning me. Creepy crap. It still makes me shake with fear, even now as a grown man. I have never told anyone about this. This could have just been fading sleep paralysis or something else logical, but it's kind of more fun to think maybe OP was being taken and returned by a ghost. I would ask OP if I could, if they ever woke up with any random marks or bruises on their body, as a lot of people who deal with ghosts report those random kind of scratches and stuff. Story 6. When I was about 8 or 9, my father took me out for a walk in the bush on the weekend. My mother and sister were overseas visiting family members. The forest was about 45 minutes of walking, and eventually you would end up at a graveyard. Being a curious kid, I was looking at the graveyard thinking how nice the flowers are and how nice the stones looked. People put stones on graveyard-colored ones. One I remembered was green and white, so I picked it up, raced up to my dad and said, "Daddy, look." My dad gave me a serious look and said, "Where did you find this?" I said, "That gravestone over there," and I pointed. My dad told me to put it back, and we never spoke anything of it, and continued our way back to our car. On the way home, my dad got dinner in a toy car which you had to build by yourself. I spent about 2 hours that night building it and went to bed. Next morning, I got up very early and continued building the car, and to put things in context, my room was on the second floor and I was facing towards the window for better lighting, I guess. Suddenly, halfway through the building, I looked up and there I saw it. A person which I can't remember. His face properly was looking at me for a good 5 seconds. Then he turned to his left and went up. Very shocked and confused, I went into my dad's room and snuck into his bed. He was still asleep. I told him later the day, and he believed me, saying it was most likely because you touched that person's grave. Story 7. On 2 separate occasions, I've seen a figure standing in my bedroom. The first time I was 8 to 9. The second time was last year. Starting about 2 to 3 years ago, I began hearing 2 distinct voices in my house. One is a female voice, the other male. The weirdest part about it is that I think the female is a lot more benevolent/frank than the male. Like, when I'm home alone, I'll hear what I think is my mother calling me from downstairs, only to go down and realize no one is there. Once I came home and opening the door, I heard the female voice say, "Oh, he's home." To which I replied, "What's for supper?" When I realized that it wasn't my mother, I yelled out that it's not funny, and then heard laughter. Not evil laughter, just haha we got him kind of laughter coming from my bedroom. The male voice has never done anything particularly malevolent, but I have heard really loud screaming in various parts of my house. Once when I was about 10 to 11, I got into the habit of covering my head with a blanket. As I was lying in bed, I heard a voice right near my head say, "Do what you want. We know you're still there." That wasn't a fun night. I've also heard the male voice singing what sounded like an Irish folk song. It all sounds a bit insane, but that's only because I'm giving about 10 years of stories in a couple paragraphs. These things don't happen every day, usually months apart when I've stopped thinking about them. What I wonder is if OP is hearing this stuff in just their house, or if they hear it everywhere. If it is just the house, then I would agree with them that maybe it is just the house that is haunted. But if OP is hearing this stuff everywhere, then this might be a true psychological issue that they need to get looked at. Story 8. I had 2 occurrences in the winter of 2009. The first one was one morning when I was getting ready for work. It was about 6 a.m. My apartment was dark and my front door was open because my girlfriend was just outside smoking, waiting for me. I was doing something in the living room and I saw a figure move past me in my peripherals. I assumed it was my girlfriend. I shivered for no reason. The figure had moved towards the back of the apartment, so about 20 seconds later, I called back and asked if she was ready to go. She poked her head from outside and said yes. I freaked the duck out and ran outside. She swore nothing went in the apartment. Fast forward about 2 weeks, I dismissed what had happened as grogginess and moved on. I didn't have a car at the time and my girlfriend wasn't around that morning, so I was walking to work. It was about the same time as the last event, a dark winter morning. Once again in my peripherals, I saw a figure moving, seeming to be keeping pace with me. I just got goosebumps typing this. Wow. It was to my left, a wide open field area with some trees. When I looked over, there was a shadowy figure mirroring my exact stance about 30 feet away. I didn't think, didn't scream, I just took off. Full sprint the last 3/4 of a mile to work. Haven't experienced anything like it since. Don't know how I feel about it to this day. Story 9. When I was 26, I moved in with a girl that had a garden apartment. The apartment was a 1-bedroom above another 1-bedroom where 4 apartments would share an entrance. So pretty much everyone living there knew each other pretty well. In the apartment below where we lived was a very nice hippie type that drove a taxi in the evenings for income. He was older, but for sure was into smoking pot. My girlfriend at the time had a very nice black cat. One night as we were sleeping, I hear a growl in my ear. I was sure it was the cat, but when I opened my eyes, I saw a ghostly face, where the eyes and mouth should have been. It was just black. Very frightening. At the same time, the cat was running around the house, jumping from wall to wall. While I was completely freaked out and did not sleep for the rest of the night, this is not the end of the story. 2 weeks later at 4:30 a.m., the police came knocking at our door. They have had to knock on the door of our downstairs neighbor, the hippie tax driver. He died in the bath and had been dead for 2 weeks. I'm pretty sure there is a correlation between what I experienced when he passed. Scares the crap out of me to think it was him or something that came to get him that woke me up and scared the cat. Maybe it was literally his spirit that was rising up, and OP just happened to wake up exactly as they were passing through the apartment and up into the afterlife. If so, talk about one hell of a coincidence. Story 10. When my little brother was around 6 years old, we lived in a beach house in Daytona. He had the room directly across from the master bedroom. My mom was on the other side of the house. Remember waking up to my mom screaming at the top of her lungs one night. I ran into the living room and was looking into the hallway, where she was pounding on an invisible door. The actual door was wide open to my brother's room. My brother was a couple inches off the bed on his back. There were roaches and ants swarming all the walls, visible from where I was standing, in complete morbid shock in the living room. My dad, ex-military/cop, started throwing bar stools and punches into the open doorway trying to get entrance. This went on for a good 45 minutes to an hour. My mother had called my grandma out of pure fear, and as soon as my grandmother tried to enter the room, I crap you not, all the insects crawled towards the bed and disappeared underneath it. She walked into the room with no problem. My brother was laying face down on the floor at this point screaming. She picked him up and walked him into our living room. Our family has never talked about this since it happened. It's been over 10 years. I have nightmares at least once a month regarding this situation. Story 11. A buddy of mine who is wild, non-religious, and does not believe in ghosts told me about something that happened to him once. He says there has to be a logical explanation for it, but he has never been able to find one. He used to live in a farm out in Ohio for something that had a typical wraparound porch with rocking chairs, etc. Every day he would get dropped off from school and walk down the long driveway to his house, walk up the stairs to the porch, and go inside. He told me that one day he was doing this, walked up to the stairs, and on his left, on the ground level, there was this woman from the 1800s who was walking on the side of his house. She was on ground level and he was on the porch, so he could only see part of her. He focused on her and she turned and looked at him, and then appeared to be floating when she came around the house and went into the woods. Creepy crap if you ask me. He still says it's not a ghost as he doesn't believe in them, but I don't know what else it would have been. One skeptical thing I've always held on to is, why are all ghosts from the 1800s? Why are there no caveman ghosts? Did they just not care? Honestly, that's a fair point that OP makes about all the ghosts people claim to see being from fairly recent centuries, compared to ghosts from the 200s. Maybe it was just something that caused people to be stuck to this plane, like the Industrial Revolution? I don't know. That's a silly theory, but it's still fun to think about. Story 12. I was camping with some friends in Western Maryland a few years ago. We see a very bright light go overhead and land on the top of a hill. We were in the forest, so it was hard to tell what the light was. After sitting there for about 20 seconds, my curiosity gets the best of me, and I decide to make my way up the hill to check it out. My friends don't want to come, so I go up alone. As I get up closer to the light, I start feeling kind of strange, almost frozen, like a deer in headlights. I stand there and I notice quiet little footsteps coming near. They are creeping, not walking clumsily like a human went through the woods. I can tell there are at least 2 of them, maybe 3. The last thing I see is the gray skin and big black eyes. I suffer lapse in consciousness. No time was lost, but it's like I was plucked from local space-time and reinserted. Some other very unpleasant things happened after that which almost led me to suicide. I can honestly say it was the worst thing that has ever happened to me, and a day doesn't go by where I don't think about that night. Story 13. The family used to own a large brownstone, but eventually people moved out and died. So eventually it was just my grandfather living on the bottom floor. I was told not to go upstairs on a few occasions, mainly because I was still a kid and could get hurt on the stairs or just messing around unsupervised. So of course, I went up there, routinely. One day I got to the 2nd floor. In front of me is an older woman in the kitchen, slightly transparent, her back to me. At this point, I am scared stiff. I must have made some noise because she turned around and looked at me, but there was something definitely not human about her eyes, and she was not happy with me. I flew down the stairs in an incoherent panic. A little over a year later, my parents showed me some old pictures, and I started freaking out. It was my great aunt who had lived on the 2nd floor before dying 5 years before I saw her. If someone were to tell me this story, I would say they're making it up, but I can't lie to myself. And while my family never saw her, they remember both events better than I do because they were adults. This is a classic example of F around and find out. And by that, I mean don't mess around. If someone says that people died somewhere and not to go up there, just don't. Or, hey, do what you want to do, but be prepared to suffer the consequences. Story 14. I don't believe it was supernatural in retrospect, but when I experienced it, it freaked me the duck out. I was in Korea over the summer in middle school living at my relatives' places. In Seoul, pretty much everyone lives in an apartment. One of my relatives lives in a particularly run-down complex. There's a general store right next to the apartment complex, and it was usually safe to go there, even at night. So I went to go get some ice cream at around midnight. I walked back and the bottom floor was quite dark. I went into the elevator, pressed the button for my floor, and waited a few seconds. Then the door opened on another floor before mine. There was this woman in a white dress, black hair, just standing near the stairs, sort of shrouded. She didn't get in her way. She was very still and far enough that I couldn't get a clear view of her face. Freaking pooping bricks as I went up the elevator, crickety sounds and all. Most likely it was just some random woman with a white dress. But the whole situation was just a huge Asian horror movie setup. Story 15. Once when I was 8, I swear I saw something non-human standing in the corner of my room. It was around 10 p.m. and this lasted until about 1 a.m. I did the whole close my eyes and it will go away routine. But when I opened them, it was still there, standing, watching. Another time when I was 13, I saw a ghost of a girl dash right past me in the woods, where I lived in North Carolina. I think of her as a ghost because when I turned back, she was gone. There were no large trees for her to hide behind, and I doubt she was fast enough to get out of eyesight. The one with the thing in the corner still kind of scares me to this day. Just typing it in the dark forced me to dash to my light switch and flick it up in a heartbeat. Story 16. At around 3 in the morning, I woke up in my bed. Next to me, looming over my bed, was a figure. It was completely black, opaque, and looked two-dimensional. It had an exaggeratedly large mouth with sharp teeth and was raising a claw-like hand. No eyes or any other features. It didn't make a sound, but within about a second or two of me waking, it jumped into the wall and quickly scurried around, almost Spider-Man-like fashion, to the other side of the room, making clawing sounds on the wall, and then disappeared. I laid in bed for a few moments and then sat up. The odd thing was I didn't feel frightened. I knew it was a dream, but I also knew I was awake when it happened. I was able to fall asleep without much trouble after that. Story 17. When I was 15, my friends and I were in a field behind one of their houses. It was about 1:30 a.m. We'd been out there for hours when suddenly my friend Gabby says, "What the duck is that?" We all turned to see this very large creature with glowing red eyes, lying on the ground with Gabby's dog and cat. We all start screaming and get up to run away. I turn around at one point to see where my friends are, and the creature starts standing up. It must have been 17 feet tall with broad shoulders and what appeared to be wings. I can't tell you what it was, but I can say, when I saw the movie Mothman Prophecies a few years later, I froze, realizing it was almost identical to the creature we saw. I don't know too much about Mothman, but at least it doesn't sound like he's violent or anything. So while you guys were freaked out, it seems like it didn't want to hurt the pets or you guys. Story 18. My family owns a large property that dates back to the 1820s-ish, although a particular staircase may be older. The house has 2 staircases. At first, otherwise it was just me. Even typing this gives me shivers, but I felt cold, unhappy, dark, odd thoughts that would cross my mind when using the staircase, so I stopped. Over 3 years, I've discovered my brother, sister, cousins, and wife have all experienced odd feelings going up and down the staircase, and as a result, almost nobody in my family uses it. Young kids in particular pretty much start screaming the second they go near it. I'm a hugely rational person, and I don't believe in spirits, ghosts, or God. But I do believe houses can feel and change depending on their past. Something happened on that staircase. Story 19. My sister and I were in a bedroom in a B&B in Ireland. We chatted for a while, then turned out the lights and got ready to sleep. The radio on the bedside table came on, in between stations, so that it was half static and half Gaelic, Irish. We couldn't understand. We tried turning it off, but the switch was already on. We stopped it by unplugging it. As soon as we did that, a knocking sound came from inside the cupboard. We opened the cupboard to find a door on the floor. It had a handle and hinges, just like a door in the wall, but on the floor. As soon as I touched the handle, the knocking stopped. The door was locked, so we never saw what was there. That sounds absolutely terrifying. I can't imagine just chilling and then hearing a random foreign language and static mixed together. then thinking you've handled the problem but hearing random knocking noises, then finding a door, I probably would have ended up just sleeping outside on the couch or something. Story 20. In my old 2-story house, there was a latch in the wall of my bedroom that led to a crawl space above the garage. It was ugly, so I put my nightstand in front of it. One night, I woke up with a start. I was laying in bed for a few seconds after a deep sleep, staring at the ceiling in my pitch-black room, and waiting for my brain to stir itself so I could do something. Then came a furious pounding on the wall directly behind my bed frame. It could have been anything, but it was with the frequency of a person, using their fist as vigorously as possible. It lasted steadily for hours, but probably 10 seconds in real time, before ceasing. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.